This is KLEAN Radio.
Welcome everybody out there listening to KLEAN Radio. Happy Memorial Day weekend to everybody, and let's give a special shout out to our troops out there that serve this country amazingly. Happy Memorial Day weekend, and thank you very much. In studio, of course, is my co-host, Andrew Spanswick, and we have an amazing guest tonight, and something that the guest and Andrew have in common, and our guest is Mariette Hartley. Is Andrew actually helped start one of the first suicide prevention programs?
Actually, I worked at one of the first ones that was started. I actually think it was the first one that was started in the country. And that's what they claimed when I was trained there.
And in 1986, and you've been helping the mentally ill ever since. And our guest tonight is Mariette Hartley, who's also started or helped start a suicide prevention program, but she's also probably been in every TV show since 19 some odd, and you've got starred in you have been in so many shows. It's your IMDb list, it's like, it says to be continued. I mean, it's like really long. Yeah, it's really long, and
it's like a channel lineup.
But you actually also did a play about suicide, right, which is a friend of mine told me was amazing. She went with you, and that dealt with family issues.
It was a one-woman show, mine. Yeah, I played 11 people. I played my mother and father and myself as a child, and growing up in a dysfunctional, that's cleaned up, crazy, kind of insane, amazing, charismatic, beautiful family that were also mentally ill. Yeah, and it was based on my book. The title of the show was "If You Get to Bethlehem, You've Gone Too Far," which is actually a quote from a friend of mine who used to be an actress and then got smart and became a nun, Dolores Hart. And she kind of answers the phone that way, so I kind of used that. But for me, it was, I'll never get to be perfect if Bethlehem connotes perfection, but it was also based on my book, Breaking the Silence.
And the silence is that there was suicide in your family, and
that was one of the silences.
One of the silences.
Because when I wrote my book, there were not a lot of visible people who had written anything about alcoholism, mental illness, or suicide, so. After my book came out, a lot more people felt safe to do it. It ruined my career, but I felt it was very important to do.
Why do you feel it ruined your career?
No, I think that's partially a joke, but
Which part?
I don't know. That's my husband, by the way, Jerry.
Jerry from Jersey. Yes, welcome
Jerry
also to KLEAN Radio.
Thank you.
Well, when Putnam came to me, I was doing the morning program. I don't know if anybody here was old enough to remember it, but I was kind of nervous about doing it because people had not talked about this. It's very, very quiet. And as a matter of fact, it's interesting because I was watching, AIDS has come up a lot over the weekend because of the Normal Heart that's showing tonight, and a huge fundraiser that was in Cannes that raised something like $30 million. It's fascinating to me that suicide is such a difficult thing to fundraise for. It's like the last bastion.
Well, it's mental health.
Talk about it.
It's mental health is the hardest thing in the world. I used to raise money in Brooklyn for teenagers that were in trouble. One of the it's saying your kids are in trouble and saying your kids are suicidal or addicted to drugs. It's not one of those things that always gets money.
No,
and because nobody really wants
AIDS
to.
can now, and that's fascinating to me. I mean, they broke the sound barrier.
Well, the moral stigma too. I mean, and I think with AIDS, it spread beyond the the homosexual population, which then I think it took that long for people to finally admit that there was a real problem. I don't know. I mean, Reagan was pretty awful in his public policy with regard to HIV and AIDS. So,
but I mean, even Obama, whom I really have great respect for, suicide is never mentioned. Mental illness just barely squeaked by. And
you know, I was actually thinking about this, though. I was thinking about this on the drive-in, why it is that we don't like to think about it, because there's no closure.
Fear, terror.
And plus, there's no immediate answer. There's no
terror, I think.
I mean, there could be but it's like we like in this country sometimes instant answers as to why this happened. Why did the rampage happen? Well, this is why.
Well, we also want cures, and one of the problems is there aren't real cures for many of the mental illness issues. Of mental illness, there's disease management, which is different, and so and then the moral stigma within families of mental illness, and then the fear that nobody will want to be a part of a family where there's a history of mental illness.
But also, because I work with suicide survivors and have since 1985, and when I mention to people that that I'm a suicide survivor, or I've survived somebody else's suicide, or I ask them if they're suicidal, you've dealt with this on the phone. There is a terror in their eyes, something about the idea that it's a contagion. If I even talk about suicide, I will do it. I will be condemned. I will be stigmatized. I mean, when Dad died, that was in 1963, and there were no groups. I think Norman Farborough, who's one of the great heroes, one of my great heroes here, was starting the first group then, and I knew nothing about groups. But the police came. I remember it. I'll never forget it. And the gun had been tossed over to the wall. My mother and I were on both sides of the bed, and my father was in bed. And the immediate reaction, I mean, you know this, Jerry, because we've talked about this, was, did you kill him? And as a survivor who's just trying to understand what happened and now knows that his or her life isn't entirely going to be filled with trying to learn how to grieve, and nobody much knows how to do that in this country. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I'm out there trying to help people with that, because it's a very, very difficult place to be. Anyway, so that's what happened, and so not only do suicide survivors stand there in front of the police, who are now getting much, they're getting better about it. But now they're on the defensive. So their first step is backwards against a wall. And then they have to begin the journey toward healing. In my case, not knowing anything about PTSD, nothing. The Vietnam War had not created that that logo, if that's the right word. It used to be called shell shock. It used to be, people from the First World War, the Second World War, they came out, and many of whom were suicidal, many of whom completed it. Today, of course, we're struggling with the Iraq veterans.
That's actually, if you just tuned in, you're listening to KLEAN Radio. We're in the studio tonight with Mariette Hartley. Give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. And it's an interesting topic that you just brought up, because the stats are staggering with how many troops are committing suicide on Memorial Day weekend.
We're losing more troops through suicide than we are in the field.
And so many people.
It's 22 a day right now, and they think it might be more than that. That's only half of the states they're studying.
And that's instant suicide. That's not the amount of soldiers
it's clear
that are coming
suicide.
back.
And you got to remember also, a lot of suicides are covered up by supposed accidents.
Right.
So if you had accidents and suicide, the numbers are skyrocketing.
And
people
alcohol.
drive their car into a tree, and
Right.
they call it an accident, but often it's suicide.
And there's so many people out there right now that are listening, and this is one of the hardest things in the world to talk about. I mean, if you actually have had a family member do it, or you're thinking about it, it's very hard to talk about.
Also, for me, suicide has always been such a difficult topic, and yet it's such a necessary topic to talk about, because the line between committing suicide and dying and not committing suicide and living and getting help is really thin.
Yeah.
People think that it's really hard to commit suicide. In fact, it's really easy if you're in the wrong frame of mind. And people don't realize how much of a crisis situation it is and how immediately people need to get help. The other thing that I found shocking about suicide in all the years I've worked is that often patients that seemed to look like they were getting better, like all of a sudden they were joyous and they seemed happy. Those are the ones that had a plan to kill themselves. And it took a long time for me to actually be able to recognize that in clients and patients, and then see, oh, is this joy appropriate, or have you actually made a plan that you've now figured out a solution?
And are now in relief.
Right.
My father went through that, and that was actually part of my show, because it's an astonishing experience to see the joy, the mania, because my father was bipolar. The manic decision, obviously, to do it, and he felt, he was done. He was done. We weren't. So, and it's difficult to live with. I mean, one of the things that Jerry and I have had to deal with, this is my husband, Jerry Soroka, was, for example, on holidays, on the 4th of July. Well, you talk about that. It's very difficult for you to understand it.
Well, it was. It isn't anymore. I mean, I get it now.
But you've also gone to groups, I guess, or you've had deep, intimate conversations about
it's been
this.
Part of the walks. I mean, we raise a lot of money for mental health and research and suicide. And
when you first started this, how many support groups would you say there were for suicide survivors? Or
I don't know. You mean when I really got involved?
Yes, when you...
Gee, I don't know. When we started the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, that was in 1987, there were no groups that we knew of. As a result of all the work that we've done, there are now about 59 groups all over the country.
It's amazing.
Survivor groups. Now that means that, and I still run mine, we're starting one actually on the 21st of June, that there are several survivors of someone else's suicide in the room. And it's unlike any support group. It's like finding a tribe that you didn't even know existed out there. I think part of the terror of having someone take their lives and pretty much in front of you, which is what happened with me, is that you're really alone, that no one else has experienced this. And one of the reasons I started coming forward about it was that I did a movie that we called Silence of the Heart, with a wonderful cast, Howard Hessman and Chad, Chad Lowe. Yeah, Rob Lowe and Chad Lowe. Yeah. He played the son who took his life. There's some wonderful people in it. And I had to, because I didn't trust the experience that I had had with my father as being really relevant to this. And I'm a big researcher. I asked that I could meet a family who had lost a son. And they came forward and were terrified. I was terrified. We were in my garden. I write about this in the book. And we all started to talk about our experiences. And they were exactly the same. We smelled the same smells. We saw the same sights. It was unbelievable. And, Jerry always kind of laughs at this because I say it, but I love it. It was really as if the scale fell from all of our eyes. And it was an epiphany. There's no question. For me, in my life, it was an epiphany. And I realized that there were people out there like me.
And sometimes that's the greatest feeling in the world. And with the 12-step groups, we get that. With Al-Anon, we get that.
Yes.
It's, to the people out there that are going through whatever you're going through right now, you don't have to do this alone.
No.
And even if you just pick up the phone, you call a friend. Yeah. Call somebody and say...
That's the hardest thing in the world.
It's the 1,000-pound elephant,
Just to get down on our knees and say help. It's the best prayer in the whole world. And I was so codependent when I first went into Al-Anon a long, long time ago. This was after Dad died. And my mother and I were very enmeshed and had a really terrible relationship. And somebody said to me, well, maybe the person on the other end of the phone will be saved. Maybe you'll help them out. And I said, okay. If I can help them out, then I'll call.
Right. And which is, they say always in the 12 steps, you're doing it for you to stay sober, not for the other. And sometimes it's, if you just tuned in, by the way, you're listening to KLEAN Radio. We're in studio tonight with Mariette Hartley. Let's go to a couple calls. Let's go to Joshua in Portland, Oregon. Welcome to KLEAN Radio, Joshua.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. About a year back, I went through a really nasty divorce, and I ended up writing a suicide note, and almost was to that point. I have a 5-year-old little girl. It just happened out of nowhere. The person left me, point blank. And I remember being at that point, and what got me through it is I did go to church. That helped a little bit, and I have never been much of a religious person, but it still helped. It motivated me. And then what I started doing is working out. I was also on antidepressants like Prozac. And eventually I just stopped taking the Prozac and just focused on working out. And I don't know, it really helped me. But when you get to that point where you're so down and you feel like, everything's coming on top of you, you just got to find, like, what I found is a hobby, something to adrenalize you, something to motivate you. And it really helps pull you out of it. Boy,
you're absolutely right. However, my feeling is that one of the things that may have really helped you was the Prozac. I'm really glad that it worked to that degree, because a lot of people, especially kids, who get on Prozac are also bipolar, and it can be a very dangerous drug for some people. But if it works, I'm telling you, it's wonderful.
Well, what I really like about antidepressants, and we've come a long way with the types of antidepressants that are now available. I mean, back as early as the mid-'80s, we had horrible antidepressants with terrible side effects, and there really wasn't very many treatment options for depression. So you couldn't really get to the underlying issues of what was causing the depression. But now we have a whole toolbox of new antidepressants, and if you're with the right doctor that can recognize whether it's working or not, it can give you a window to then explore the underlying issues that might be causing the depression.
You bet.
And that's that's the gift of antidepressants.
Yeah, I remember being on Zoloft for a while, like back in high school, and that stuff never did anything for me.
Right. And you know what? And they're just coming out now with genetic profiling, where you can actually take a profile and it will show which antidepressant of those that are available you're most likely to respond to. So as a profession,
it may not be an antidepressant. It may not be a mood stabilizer.
Right. And Joshua, do you still go to therapy?
No, I'm completely fine. I was on Prozac for maybe 3 months.
Wow.
And then with my own personal, motivation, going to work out, stuff like that. But while you're on it, that's what it's for. It's for to, kind of suppress you a little bit and help get you, to the point where you do go and search for things and you can get back on that level. Once you find something that puts you on edge, it works.
But some people need to stay on it longer than you do.
I mean, everybody's different, but in your case example,
the thing that I wanted
clear.
to say really clearly about this, because I've been on a mood stabilizer since 1994, I really feel that in my case, my bipolar disorder is biochemical. There's no question in my mind but that it is physical and biochemical. And I don't want to fuss around with getting off of my medication.
We couldn't agree with you more.
And that's actually the major problem with people that have mood disorders is
they stop taking.
That they're not compliant with their medication.
Right.
And a lot of people have a phobia about medications, and a lot of that is due to some of the side effects have been horrible. And also people are attracted to the manic side of the bipolar illness phase.
I know.
And it's also I have a friend that I've been trying for years to say, come on, please, you need to go on. And he always says to me, he's scared of what it's going to do to him, and
especially sexually.
And I'm like, right now something's not working.
Right.
Yeah.
Give it a try. That something might enhance.
One of the wonderful things about Kay Redfield Jamison's book is that she was the first woman, first of all, the first psychiatrist to come out about her bipolar disorder. But she was the first person that I knew of who talked about not overbuying, not the typical things that happen with bipolar people, but sexual
Yeah.
It was
So the sexual side
for
effects.
her. It was there was a sexual side to it, and I don't think that's unusual. I also don't think road rage is unusual as a manifestation of bipolar disorder. You know, that.
Joshua, can you do me a favor? Is call back sometime. I want to just know how you're doing over time, because like you're talking about, like Mariette's talking about, like Andrew's talking about, this is something that sometimes doesn't always leave, and I'm really happy you're doing well now. Yeah. But just check in.
Just monitor yourself.
Oh, yeah. I will. And honestly, the whole bipolar thing is like, I didn't know what was wrong with me. Yeah. I've always had like this bipolar tendency in high school and all that stuff growing up. But then when I actually kind of like took the problem and said, well, you know what, I went to my doctor. He said, well, why don't you try this, because you do have some slight signs of depression. So I tried it out. And, honestly, it works. So, you can't be afraid to try it.
No, you can't. Right. But it's also so important just stay in touch
with yourself
and let others know how you're doing. It doesn't have to be everybody. Just let some people know how you're doing.
And I think one of the reasons that is that sometimes you can't gauge how you're doing yourself. Having an outside perspective of someone that really knows you and that you're open with, and that can give you feedback and give you a bit of a mirror of what's going on with you, can be very, very helpful. So.
Okay, Joshua, promise you'll check in every once in a while.
Thanks for calling.
No problem, man. You
okay,
guys have a good one.
Thanks
Bye.
a lot, Joshua. And if you just tuned in, that was Joshua calling from Portland, Oregon. If you just tuned in, you're listening to Clean Radio. You could also find us at facebook.com/Clean Radio. Friend us, like us, let us know how you're doing, because that's extremely important to us. We're in studio tonight with Mariette Hartley, and we're talking about an issue that I don't think a lot of people... There's no, it's not always a fun topic to talk about, which is people harming themselves, people, committing suicide, the family members. There's no glitz. There's glitz. It's become, it's easy for, we live in LA, everybody's sober. Nobody has a problem.
There's nothing romantic about suicide.
Right.
And it is interesting because you've said it a couple of times, both of you, about committing suicide. I've tried very hard to get the idea of crime away from suicide. And to me, the word committed or committing means that it's a crime.
Right.
And I know that you are, really devoted to the idea that this is, that most of the time, 90% of the time anyway, it's mental illness that creates it.
I think it's the same thing on that word.
We talk about this a lot, that the criminalization of mental illness has been going on more and more. I mean, we've seen a direct shift from people going into psychiatric hospitals to now being in prisons and jails. And, the amount of psychiatric help for people that are mentally ill in prisons and jails is extremely low. Yeah. I mean, it averages, one patient or one psychiatrist for every 200 plus patients on average. Jeez. So, it's just not the place to treat people.
And again, it's a lot of these things, taking the stigma away from what we call mental illness. How many people are not getting help? And we said, let's change the words, let's call it a mental vacation. And whatever helps people get help. And sometimes the words prevent people from getting help, like you said, committing suicide.
Well, also, I mean, to me, that it's biochemical helps me so much. It's not my fault. It comes,
Yeah. And that's Mariette Hartley. We got to go to break. We'll be back in a couple secs. If you just tuned in, give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. Discussion continues at Clean Radio.
Don't let addiction to drugs or alcohol steal another year of your life. KLEAN Treatment Center provides world-class addiction assistance that also treats the underlying causes and provides vital aftercare so people can get clean and stay clean. Live, kind, professional help is standing by to provide immediate assistance or to simply answer questions and provide guidance. If you or someone you care about is suffering from addiction, take action now and make 2014 the best year of your life with KLEAN Treatment Center.
Now back to Andrew Spanswick and Judah Friedman.
Welcome back to Clean Radio. In studio tonight with Mariette Hartley. We're talking about suicide and troops coming back and the staggering rate that troops are committing suicide, and the Memorial Day weekend, and thanking our troops. But before that, let's go to our social media ombudsman, Delmer Buddy Totten, telling us what's been going on Facebook.
How's it going? Let's see. We posted, what is your definition of alcoholism/addiction? Share your thoughts with us. And Mary, she posted, cripples the mind and one's ability to make sense of one's life, thus leaving one with blinders on and tunnel vision, hopeless, always looking for the next fix just to make it through the day. Sad, very sad.
That's good. That's. I think she should get something. I think she should. That's like the answer of the year. I think.
Yeah,
I think if you contact Buddy, Buddy will send you some Clean Radio stuff.
Absolutely.
And this is all on Facebook.com/Clean Radio.
So what else we got, Buds? Is that good?
Okay, let's see. And then also we also posted the use of slogan in recovery programs in life. Puts us oftentimes into a lot of debate, but tell us, what slogans do you like? And so, we got a lot of the usual, it works if you work it, this too shall pass, one is too many, 1,000 is never enough. And then after all that, Frank put a very interesting quote, or comment rather, slogans are like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. Repeating vain repetitions through your head isn't a permanent solution and will eventually fail. Changing the thinking process altogether is the intensive surgery, getting in there and removing the bullet.
And that's Frank? Yeah. That's awesome, Frank. Thank you. You also get some stuff, because thank you, Buddy. What Frank was just talking about is what we've been talking about in a sense tonight with suicide and mental illness is, for years we've been putting a Band-Aid. We haven't really dealt with mental illness, Andrew.
Well, but even the support groups can do that. I mean, I think once one does get sober, there are steps to do, and a lot of people say, nah, I don't really need to do those steps. It's really okay. And then stuff really starts coming up. I mean, I liken it to standing by the La Brea tar pits, and you stand there and you look at all these bubbles that come up, and you hear, you say, "Man, you can believe that friggin' bubble has been there." That's gases that are coming up from 1 million years ago, and I think I certainly have felt that way emotionally. It's these things start coming up, and we think, oh, wait, I'm done with that. I'm done with that. But the core work is it's what he's talking about, taking the bullet out of the brain. I don't know that one can successfully do that completely. But boy, the emotional core work is really important.
Freud, and Freud's somewhat unpopular these days in the popular culture, but Freud had this concept of the economy of the mind, and that there's about 7 things that you can consciously be aware of and deal with. And as you fix one or you retire one from your thinking, another one will pop up from your unconscious. And a lot of dealing with issues of mental health and trauma and things like that has to do with that. Like, you deal with an issue, and then the next most important thing becomes an issue. And it's multifold. It's 7 things on average that you can handle. But a lot of the things that you can't handle still stay in your unconscious. They stay in you. And a lot of them are expressed through physical illness, through mental pain and anguish and nightmares and things like this, which we see a lot with PTSD and with soldiers coming back, where they're not even aware of what's really going on that's bothering them so deeply. And it takes a lot of work to get to the point where you clear enough of the issues away that you can get to the one that's really the deep underlying trauma.
Yeah, in the New York Times today, there's a wonderful article about PTSD, and it was actually somebody, a dancer from the Martha Graham dance troupe, helped to create this wonderful kind of movement to help clear the PTSD pictures. I mean, that's what we in the groups have to deal with a lot, because a lot of people were there at the time. What was the picture of my father like that? What was it? So, and this particular, it sounds very much like psychodrama. There's a man that's working up in Esalen right now who's a psychologist, and he works with role-playing, and it's really an essential way to get the PTSD cleared if it's at all possible.
And let's get to a call, because Nora's been waiting on hold for a while.
Nora.
Nora's been on hold for 15 minutes.
Nora from Sacramento. Welcome to Clean Radio, Nora.
Hey, you guys. Thank you for taking my call.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing really well. In the same age group as Mariette.
Oh, God. Oh, happy birthday, I guess.
42.
Happy,
No.
yeah, right.
It's really, really good. One of the things that, in listening to you folks, is I've been in recovery 15 years now.
Congratulations.
what I've noticed is there are more deaths from suicide than there are those who succumb to the disease.
Well, I've often stated, not to cut you off, Nora, but I've often stated that, you know, if people are actively engaged in drug abuse to the point where they're using, you know, significant narcotics, or they're getting out of control and drinking and driving, there has to be a level of suicidal thought or ideation going on within them. You can't engage in those types of self-destructive behaviors without seeing it as part of a suicidal process, even if it's a precursor to the direct act.
Also,
I think, Mariette, you know, one of the things that you were right on top of was in doing the 12 steps, the idea is like in Shrek, you know, you're pulling away the layers of the proverbial onion. Mm-hmm. And no one comes with instruction books that says once you start really tapping into these feelings, whether you have a sponsor or not, and hopefully you do, is they're very profound, and it takes every bit of what you have.
Yeah, and also
not just to stay sober, but just to begin to face that, whether you created the trauma or the trauma was a part of where you were living and what you were doing.
Right. My one of my problems about the whole issue of medication in the program is that many people don't allow it.
Yeah, all the doctors that never went to medical school.
Yeah,
and the 12 steps. Yeah,
and because you were talking about how many people died of suicide versus the disease. I guess you mean alcoholism,
alcohol and or narcotics.
All right, but I think that we need to make an open mic in these meetings to discuss. Look, I work with survivors, and part of the problem part of the thing that I see is that there are many people from the program who have taken their own lives as a result of somebody saying, if you take this medication, you're not sober. What the hell does that mean?
There's a huge reason, though, just so you know, that Andrew and I actually started this show, was because of we saw stuff like that. And we wanted to start.
For me, it's horrific. I can't believe how many people you go to like an AA meeting.
I was told.
And they tell you that
homicidal.
I was told by somebody.
So they tell you that like mental illness is a myth, and you know you don't need medication. And I'm like, you've never worked in a acute care psych unit.
You know, big book, though.
Right, and
if you read your big book, it
actually says
it actually says that this might not be enough. Go seek outside help. And I was actually told by somebody that they wouldn't sponsor me.
Yeah.
Because
I
had
into that.
I was taking something at the time. And what I call them is, and this is my word, you could steal it. It's called a metaphobe. And essentially, it's people just like homophobes, usually people that hate homosexuals,
or have a fear of them,
or have fear of them, are usually gay. And just like people that are the metaphobes are usually people that actually need to be on the meds in the first place.
MEDA.
My Brooklyn accent comes out on that one. And it's very dangerous. And I just want to tell you, Nora, you know, one of the things that really changed is because I used to say to people all the time, I would say, I don't see myself relapsing. I would commit suicide before I relapse. And people would look at me and go, oh, did you just, I was like, that's not what I'm not saying I'm committing suicide.
It seems like it is, let's face it, it is a solution to pain and suffering.
Right.
And most people that commit suicide are trying to end a lot of pain and suffering, and they don't see another way out.
Profound
pain
and suffering.
One of the great things is, instead of finding the first sponsor that you have, I know it's different for a younger person. It took me until I was 45 to come into the rooms, and now I'm 60. And
we're not nearly the same age. I'm much older than you.
Yeah. Sure.
I am.
I used to watch your show, honey. Or shows. It's really important.
How old do you think I was when I did Bonanza?
You were a youngster like myself, and I was watching. It's really important, and that's where really the backup comes before you get the sponsor, is look for someone who's not all about their ego. I'm blessed to have found a sponsor who pretty much says, if it's between you and your doctor, I'd like to know about it. because I'm concerned about you. But I've been taking Celexa, and I've been sober. It'll be 15 years in September. Been taking Celexa for 4 years. And the last time I
Did it change your sobriety, Nora?
Was way before. It was 5 years. So this Alexa's been amazing.
Oh, so it did change your sobriety.
Oh, wait.
That's amazing.
No, she didn't change my sobriety date. No.
No. She said that it changed your sobriety. Has it enhanced your life in the last 4 years?
Oh, the dark is not so freaking dark, and even going through homelessness at 60 for a while, and
that's amazing.
Fear-based. It didn't grab me like it used to grab me in 10 minutes and, hold me down on the ground and whack me.
Thank you for
It isn't like that anymore, and I am blessed to have found
a medication that works.
A sponsor that really knows the big book.
Nora, are you on Facebook?
Doesn't say you can't have medication or outside help. In fact, just the opposite.
Nora, are you on Facebook? Because we got to run.
Yeah, thank you.
Go to Facebook.com and like us so we could see who you are. Private message us. Just to drop by and say hello.
I've liked you for a long time before I ever spoke.
You're the best,
thank you, Nora.
And
thanks,
thank
sweetheart.
You.
Thanks for calling.
If you just tuned in, you're listening to KLEAN Radio. That was Nora. And one of the great things about Andrew, and Andrew doesn't talk about himself enough with the amount he helps people, is what you guys are both talking about, the advocacy you've been doing and the advocacy Andrew has done and continues to do, is essentially break the stigma, is break the cycle, break all these words, because people are dying because of this. Right. There are people in 12-step groups that are scared to say, I need help and I need extra help, because they've had people say, and I'm a huge advocate for the 12 steps. It kept me alive.
But there's some people who can't even touch them unless they're on. I'd like to also mention that my husband, who knows all about this stuff, I could not.
This would be great if this was the first time. Jerry, this is her life.
Yeah.
And you found out everything at this moment.
Well, that's the way it did happen when we first met. He read the book. I had to leave town, and I said, here, read this. And
that's great. That's what you all do.
He read it and went, oh, my God.
You might have a long book, Judah.
And he's still with me. But, I mean, he knew nothing about support groups and didn't think that he needed them. Tell him about the first time.
I didn't need him. I still don't need him. The first time?
Yeah, first time.
Well, you came over. Oh, you mean nothing about us? You mean about the support groups?
Yeah.
The sexual support groups that I was, or the. The first meeting, I just somebody. Oh, right. It was a double winners meeting.
What am I doing here?
Right, and somebody came up to me afterwards. And
explain what a double. A lot of people that are listening don't know what we're talking about. A double winners meeting is essentially. It sounds funny, but it's when you're a recovering alcoholic and you go to Al-Anon. They're meeting that it's
not necessarily. You could just be somebody who is married to an alcoholic or dating an alcoholic.
Right, but what I mean, what the double winners meeting is it's an Al-Anon meeting and an AA meeting at the same time.
Right.
Yes.
No, I was right on top of it. A couple of guys stopped me on the way out, and they said, so why are you here? And I said, well, I don't know. And they said, well, what's your name? I said, Jerry. They said, well, you're here because you're dating an alcoholic. And I said, no, I'm not. She hasn't had a drink in 20 years.
Very
that was my knowledge. And it's stayed about the same, I guess.
No. Remember when we first dated, and you said, I can get her drinking in about a month.
Well, just, a beer and a hamburger. What's going to be the big deal? Yeah, that was.
But this isn't unusual.
No.
I mean,
Well, that's what we were discussing. It's what is an to non-alcoholics.
Yeah.
They can't understand what a drink means to an alcoholic. That a drink to an alcoholic is you might never see that alcoholic again. That might be the last date you ever went on. and it's like I love hearing Jerry share about that because it's a natural thought.
Right.
I have the same thing when I meet people with food, that have a food addiction. Just have one brownie, There's nothing wrong with one brownie, 10 hours later, they've gone through the whole bakery, and and it's we have a hard time getting that. So let's go on, Jerry. So you've been in Al-Anon now.
I've been in Al-Anon now.
For a long time.
For a long time. I can do this by myself,
Yeah, please do.
Anyway, no, it was, I remember the first Al-Anon, the straight Al-Anon meeting I went to. That means there were gays there too, but it was a straight Al-Anon meeting. And Mariette kept giving me the elbow. Why don't you talk? Why don't you talk? I said, why don't you stop telling me to talk? I think part of this program is letting me do what I want to do and not being. And my hand went up, and no, actually, her hand went up, and she points to me.
Oh my goodness!
She's 11'13", and I'm 4'11", and she's pointing down at my head, and I feel the hand, and I look up, and before I know it, I've been recognized. And they said, do you have anything to say? And I said, yes. Would you tell my wife to stop asking me to talk? And I said things. I said a few things like, yes, my father hit me, but only when I deserved it, when I was little. And everybody laughed, and I didn't particularly think it was funny. It was the truth.
Right.
My father only hit me when I deserved it. I've come a bit of a ways.
When he said that to me, which was really interesting, I said, I'm sorry, what? So we now are calling me Ingmar Bergman's mother because I am the dark lady of in the room. And I said, what do you mean he hit you? And he said, oh, I don't know. It wasn't a big deal. I said, how old were you? He said, oh, about 6 or 7. I said, Jerry, that's child abuse. And he said, no, I deserved it.
It's the 50s.
That's right.
That's what you hear so many people say. Well, no, it's the 50s.
That's right.
That wasn't child. I mean, you constantly hear people share that. Everybody did it in the 50s. Right. Mm-hmm. And if you just tuned in, you're listening to Clean Radio. We're in studio tonight with Mariette Hartley and her significant other, her better half.
Shorter.
What's wrong with you guys? All you guys need an Al-Anon meeting, okay? Bunch of codependent, mean people.
That's how she got me here. She told me this was an Al-Anon meeting.
Jerry, I'm on your side.
We're going to do an intervention on being short in the complex.
Jerry, I'm...
he has no complex.
No complex. Mean people.
Yeah, no.
And sorry, I didn't mean to bring you in. This is on
Listen,
Clean Radio.
I have learned so.
Let's just ignore them.
I play senior softball a couple times a week. And,
what does that look like?
Oh, it's heaven. He's written the most fabulous script about it, and it is going to be made into a movie.
Yeah, it's well on its way.
That's amazing.
We're so excited.
That's cool.
But at any rate,
That's
it's a comedy with serious overtones.
You know you're coming back when that happens.
Yeah, I hope so.
You don't have to bring Mariette. Don't worry.
Oh, I'll come twice. Anyway.
Wow.
So somebody
It's going to be about divorce in softball.
We're all going to need a meeting after this. You know what? Can I just say something? I just want to tell people out there that are listening, what we're doing in the studio, what Mariette's doing, what Jerry's doing, what Andrew's doing, what we're all doing, and we're joking and we're laughing. And the reason why people were laughing at when you said that, that about getting hit, it was only because... It's the laughter that helps us get better.
You bet.
And when
it's also the laughter of recognizing the insanity of not being able to recognize that some things aren't right, and you're just conditioned because as a child you don't know.
Yeah.
And so you just accept the world around you. And it's amazing how many people's preconceived notions of what they think is right and wrong are out of touch with reality.
That was the norm.
It's just so out there.
Yeah.
So it's just so out there.
And you just found out that your sister, that he had done that to your sister.
Keep my sister out of this.
Sorry.
But, I mean, this conversation, this banter is the banter of people getting better. It's the banter of health starting to happen. It's because you take somebody and you put them in a 12-step meeting sometimes, or just a normie, as we would call them, and they hear us laughing at some stuff, and they look at us going, how can you laugh at that?
Why is that funny?
What is that? And because 100 people in that room probably had the same response, Jerry, that when they said, why did you get hit? Well, I deserved it.
Yeah.
And those 100 people that are starting to get better.
So talk about, just briefly, I don't know how much time we have. We're probably...
Enough to hear this.
So I play senior softball.
Yeah.
And Jerry has heard so many phone conversations, and he knows so much about this now, by osmosis.
Osmosis. A guy ran up to me and he said, "Did you hear about?" I don't want to use his name. Did you hear about Sydney? And I said, "No." He said, "His girlfriend," he said, "committed suicide yesterday, and he's out there at the game." And I immediately, you see, a little education. It's a dangerous thing. I immediately went over to the field where he was playing, and I walked over to him and I said, "Listen, I heard what happened, and I want you to know my wife's heavily involved in this." And I said, "I know a little bit about it." I said, "How are you doing?" Asked him the right questions, and he not only is now getting into Mariette's group, which is terrific, but he comes over and reports to me. I feel like I didn't tell him I know very little, but he comes over to me now and just unloads. And I play with him on Tuesday, and he has this young man who called in earlier and talked about working out the physical process. He was physically active, and it helped him. Well, this kid, he's a man. He's my age, and we won't discuss what that is. He gets out there in the field now, and he's crushing the ball. It's very interesting to watch, and there's a joy and a lightness about him that I haven't seen. So the relationship was obviously very tough on him and everything. But I'm so happy that I'm able to go over and because nobody wants to talk to him about it. Everybody's afraid to talk to him about, again, the stigma.
Well, suicide is a lot of internalized anger or internalized fear or internalized stuff. And, when you're homicidal, you externalize it. And so all these killings we see are really a lot of people externalizing a lot of their feelings.
Kill themselves.
And then they kill themselves because they realize what's going on, and then they revert back to suicidal ideation. But just the ability to cathartically release some of that energy with physical exercise and then also be able to talk about it verbally with someone is priceless.
People talk to me and ask me, well, why do you do these groups? And I do them because, for exactly that reason, that I feel so wonderful when they're over, not because they're horrible, but because they bring my life into such colorful focus. It's hard to describe. I mean, I know you know what I'm talking about. And to see people get well and become integrated. Dolores Hart, my friend who was an actress and got smart and became a nun. She and I used to talk together. Used to go up to her monastery and talk to her. And she said, I've learned in my 30 years of contemplation, which of course, as Jerry knows, drives me crazy because if I'm quiet for 15 minutes, I think I've died.
You should try it
30 years. 30 years.
That's how long you guys are together?
No. And
that was like really quick answer to no.
Yeah. No, we're old fart newlyweds. I mean, yeah. But anyway, she said, is that one's deepest wounds integrated become one's greatest power. It just gives me chills. And I think the key to that concept is integration. And this is how we integrate. We integrate by listening, by talking, and a lot of the time.
And I hate to cut you up, but this is a common thing with a lot of things. Like we're like brought up to think we have to win all the time, and everything has to go perfect. But the reality is, you never really learn anything when you're winning anything. You just sort of think that you're great and everything's wonderful. Yeah. It's when you lose things or you have trauma, or and then you come back up from that. That's where you really learn experience. That's where you learn coping skills. That's where you learn, what it really means to be human. Yes. That's where you learn how to communicate with other people. Yes. That's where you get true deep friendships.
And confidence.
So even if you're going through something that's absolutely horrible, there's an opportunity in there to really create a better life for yourself and create a whole nother way of looking at the world.
It's a perfect example of that, and I really do want to get him for 30 seconds. He's been waiting on hold for about 22 minutes.
Dear.
Is our caller? He's a regular caller, Mariette, and he's actually in a facility in Salem, Oregon, where they shot One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And he's sentenced there for about 7 years, and he calls in just to check in, say how he's doing, and he's actually, I'm telling his story, but he's actually now in minimum security.
That's what we heard last time.
Or medium security.
Well, we don't know where he is today.
Todd, it's Todd. Say hello to Mariette and Jerry.
Hi, Mariette. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Judah.
And Jerry.
And Jerry. Hi.
How are you,
It's
Todd?
really great that you're doing all that suicidal prevention work, because it's really, as you've read the statistics, it's really needed in America.
Oh, thank you.
Todd, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm still on max. They're still talking about moving me. I'm on the transition list, and I'm transitioning still. And the doctor just put me on lithium.
Oh.
And I'm still on lithium and Seroquel and Lamictal.
Well, Todd, keep doing what they're telling you to do, and
So you've been diagnosed, in other words.
Oh, I've got bipolar 1 with psychotic features.
Oh, honey. Wow.
I interact with the TV and the radio when I get really psychotic.
Wow.
Well, that's why there's good medications now that hopefully will work for you.
And you sound good. And Todd's been going to school, right, Todd?
I've been going to college, and I'm writing a manuscript right now. I got 87 typed pages.
That's amazing,
Wow.
Todd. So Todd's a perfect example of the system really working, in a sense. He's taking stuff. He's taking his antidepressants. He's taking what needs to be taken, and he's
taking mood stabilizers.
And he's moving on with his life.
I'm a really good poet now.
Oh,
and
really?
Todd, he actually reads it sometimes to us. We can't get to that right now, Todd, because we're running out of time.
Okay, well, have a great week, you guys. Thanks a lot. I really
too, Todd.
appreciate all the work you've done and the help that you're helping people.
Thank
Todd,
you.
You
keep
too.
on.
You rock,
keep on.
Todd.
Keep on.
Okay, God
okay?
bless all you.
You
God
too,
bless
Todd.
you.
And that was Todd. And I want to thank again. We're running out of time. I really just want to. We're talking about the troops, and anybody out there that's struggling and you're thinking about anything right now, give us a call. The number is 888-601-6040. That's 888-601-6040. It's absolutely free. There are a lot of troops. It's a passionate thing for us at KLEAN that we want to help anybody we can, but especially the troops coming back with PTSD. Give us a call. Insurance, no insurance, we'll help to the troops coming back. We'll figure out a way to get you help.
There's one last thing I just want to say, and I know we're running out of time, but sometimes nothing really bad needs to seem to have happened for people to have suicidal thoughts. And some people feel suicidal and end up actually trying to commit suicide or actively engage in suicidal behavior without knowing that it's going on. And there doesn't necessarily have to be an obvious triggering event for it to happen. We talk about how there's so many triggering events that do lead to this. But if you're feeling suicidal and you don't know why, that's still a good reason to reach out and talk to someone.
Mariette, how do people find you?
I have a website.
Yes.
Which is Mariette Hart.
We're going to link it on Facebook. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
No, MarieetteHartley.com.
MarieetHartley.com. And Jerry, how do people find you?
He's easy.
Where's the softball game that people can find Jerry at?
Mine is also jerrysoroka.com.
And here's the thing: we're going to link both of them because people out there, you two have done amazing. You're doing amazing work, and thank you because people out there are listening. Are going to get help tonight because of what you guys have been talking about, what we've been talking here at KLEAN Radio. There's no need to harm yourselves. Whatever you're going through, whatever dark tunnel you guys are in that are listening out there, there is a solution. There is help.
And thank you to our listeners, and thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, guys. Boy, are you doing wonderful work. Thank you. Bless your hearts.
Don't let addiction to drugs or alcohol steal another year of your life. KLEAN Treatment Center provides world-class addiction assistance that also treats the underlying causes and provides vital aftercare so people can get clean and stay clean. Live, kind, professional help is standing by to provide immediate assistance or to simply answer questions and provide guidance. If you or someone you care about is suffering from addiction, take action now and make 2014 the best year of your life with KLEAN Treatment Center.